Hey everyone, welcome back to the Outer Banks Health History, the official podcast series of the Outer Banks Hospital Medical Group. This month marks 20 years since the hospital opened. We will be celebrating with weekly episodes that feature guests who will speak about life before the Outer Banks Hospital, as well as its early years. We are your hosts, Denise Schnabel.
And I'm Wendy Kelly. We're in for a treat today because our guest is an Outer Banks icon. He's responsible for several high-profile restaurants in our community and made his mark by organizing the longest St. Patrick's Day parade in North Carolina. You may know him from Mako Mike's, or from Pamlico Jack's, or from the famed Kelly's Restaurant and Tavern. Let's welcome the one and only Mike Kelly.
Hey, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
How are you?
Denise and Wendy, excellent. Nice seeing you today.
Good to see you. So thank you for being here. Before we begin, I would like to tell our listeners that even though they have the same last name, Wendy and Mike are not related.
Thanks, Denise.
You're welcome. Well, you could be long-lost cousins or something. You never know.
Could be.
Could be.
But
All right, let's talk to Mike Kelly. Thank you for being here again. So you have done so much for this community. How long have you actually been on the Outer Banks?
Since 1972. I graduated from college, took my last exam, came to the Outer Banks, and haven't left yet.
That's amazing.
it is amazing. How did you come here? Why'd you end up here?
I grew up in Elizabeth City and came often to visit during the summers when I was in high school. And then as I got into college, I got a job at a restaurant, enjoyed the business, and then just continued to stay and had a lot of friends down here too.
So that was the 1970s?
The early 70s, we graduated in 72, yes.
Uh-huh. So do you remember when you came here that there wasn't a hospital?
Very easily. But when you're 21 and 22 years old, the need for a hospital doesn't seem to be as relevant as it does when you're 71 and 72. I will tell you that.
So did you ever need a hospital?
I've needed a hospital on more occasions than I thought in all the services that they offer. Yesterday, I had a colonoscopy. Today, I had an eardrum pierced because I had liquid behind my eardrum. And those are two things you would just never begin to think. And I'm very thankful for the hospital, but I'm very sorry that I'm falling apart.
Well, we're here for you.
Well, at least you don't have to travel back to Elizabeth City for your health care these days, right? You're local and you're all here. So tell us the story. You told us a funny story about your teeth and the fact that there was no medical care for you. Tell us that story.
In July of 1967, I was down here visiting some friends, specifically a girlfriend, and we were out on the ocean front in Nags Head, approximately the area of the restaurant right now, and on the ocean, having a good time. And her mother went to get us a pizza for lunch, and it was probably about 1 or 1:30 by that time, and we were playing around with a surfboard. And, of course, we were trying to surf, and there was not enough surf to begin to make yourself be able to surf, but I'm probably pretty lucky because it was when I was just first starting to learn. And next thing I know, all of a sudden, a wave came, and we were sticking around, and next thing I know, it hit me in the mouth and busted out. And very fortunate, it just hit me pretty square in the mouth and only busted out about 5 teeth.
Only 5?
Only 5.
So, and luckily we had a towel on the beach, and we took the towel and stuffed it in my mouth and tried to stop the bleeding and everything, and then just get across the street, and we made a call. And I don't think you had 911 at that time. Of course, I don't know, because you didn't have a cell phone, so you couldn't begin to call from the beach. You just had to walk over to the house. And I don't even know can't even recall if the house had a telephone. Probably had to go to like
the phone booth on the corner.
The phone booth on the corner and begin and call them. And sit there and wait for the ambulance. But as we waited for the ambulance drove up, but it wasn't an ambulance. It was a station wagon. It was a Ford Fairlane station wagon.
Wow.
And it was what Dare County had at that time. And it had some oxygen in there and had a stretcher that you laid out and began to look at it. And then you didn't go to the hospital, which would have been approximately a mile and a half from where the accident happened. We had to go to Elizabeth City, to Albemarle Hospital. And that was probably about 65
That's right.
miles away. that was a very exciting time.
Do you remember
Gross.
that ride in the Ford Fairlane up there? Were you in pain? And
I do remember, too, that my girlfriend's mother looked at me in my teeth, and she says, "What am I going to do with these pizzas?"
I was going to say.
Pizza were the priority at that moment. But anyway, no, it was just very basic. It was the back of a station wagon with a stretcher and the medication and 2 EMTs, one driving and one riding shotgun. I'm very fortunate with taken care of, but also very happy of what we have to offer on the Outer Banks now to begin to address those kind of situations. And not that teeth would have grown back any quicker or anything, but I was fortunate it was not catastrophic. It was just a trauma, and it was more trauma for my mother than it was for me, but other than that.
Of course.
Aw.
Well, I got to admit, I was wondering what happened to the pizzas. I was sitting here wondering. So do you remember when they were beginning the whole process of building the hospital, and what was that like in the community? Were you already a restaurant owner by then? Or do you remember in 2002?
2002.
2002, oh yes. I had my first restaurant. I had worked in ones from 1970 to 85 and then bought my first one in 1985.
Oh, okay.
But it was, a lot of politics were involved because there were very few regional hospital operations that wanted to locate in Dare County. We did not have a great deal of population. We were seasonal, and they felt that was not going to be able to address the needs. You have to also realize that in the mid-'70s, we didn't have a single doctor on the Outer Banks. And Dr. Walter Holton came in about 76 or 77, and he was the only doctor on the Outer Banks. Now, I would assume that we probably have 60 to 90 doctors or something on the air. I have no idea. You would have.
More than one.
More than one. Yeah, more than one. But we're stretched out. I mean, to think of not having a doctor on the main part of the northern Outer Banks, think of what happened on like Hatteras Island.
That's right.
Happened in Corolla.
I can
and,
imagine.
And things like that. It was just what you would take for granted.
So we've noticed some changes since the hospital came in 2002. What do you think some of the big innovations are from your standpoint? And as a business owner, how did the hospital impact your businesses?
It impacted very positively because we had an employee that had anything from a bad cold or whatever the need was, they were available. They were very limited, especially at the beginning, because they didn't know what they needed to be getting into. And I'm sure that from 2002 into 2022, that there's been the opportunity and the specialties that we've been needing to have. And just like I said today already, I mean, in the last 36 hours, I've had a colonoscopy and again an eardrum pierce. Somebody to take care of to getting liquid out of your inner ear, and that was not even around. We were more talking about general practitioners. And what has begun to occur, and the population of Dare County is so happy with the hospital and the services that it renders, and the mobility that it is taking on itself of having people located strategically around the county, and a great deal of hospitals and a great deal of services being offered is just a great deal more than anybody would have anticipated at that time ago. And the specialties that the doctors offer, and that people, they come down and the doctors themselves and their families enjoy relocating to the area. We offer a great deal as far as natural resources and just really enjoyable, and it's good to come down and have a job and do what you do.
Being all the way out here, we really are rural. We're about as far east as you can get. And to have the services that we have out here is pretty unusual for this kind of community. And I came 1 year after the hospital opened. I didn't know what it was like without a hospital. And I think many folks here don't know what it would be like without a hospital.
I will remember that a friend of mine, Francis Meekins, who was the owner of the Coastland Times, which was the main public relations, main marketing type thing, main information type of thing for the Outer Banks, and called me up one day when I was on a the Dare County Tourist Bureau Board and talked to me, and he was mentioning about a piece of property he had in Kill Devil Hills, which is where the Lowe's is right now. And he was mentioning and how people had wanted to buy his piece of property, and he was not interested in selling it. And he was going to begin to do, and he said, there's only two things I will ever do with that property. And he said, I want you to help me to begin to do one of them. And either one, I don't know. I said, well, Mr. Meekins, what is it, the two things that you think is so important? He said, one is a hospital. And that was the very first thing. That ended up not being the location of the hospital, but there it is, the person that had a great deal of influence in the county and began to put out a lot of positive comments about the hospital. And this was in the early mid-'90s. And then, a short time, 7 to 8 years later, there was a hospital. But you did saw that, and you saw the county commissioners and the towns just wanting to begin to do it. There's up behind the Ace Hardware in Nag's Head, on the hill, there's a small on-call type of thing, but that's where the EMTs operated out of. They had a landing pad there for a helicopter, and I think they had real ambulances by that time, but that was a big thing, and one of the steps about how we progressed so much on the Outer Banks.
We really have.
That's pretty cool that he had the vision that he would put a hospital on that property. I mean, that's pretty neat. So tell us, you've been here a while, you've seen a lot of things, you've done a lot of things, you've experienced a lot of things. What would you like to see the Outer Banks moving forward? Anything?
We have a real need present for workforce housing. I think if we're going to grow and if we're going to be able to take care of the people that come down here to call this their home on a permanent basis, or the people that come down here to begin to vacation and to enjoy this, and there are a great deal of people that come down on a part-time basis that own a property, own a home, and some of them rent them out, some of them don't rent them out. And I know that things such as Airbnb, and there are a whole lot more opportunities, and I think we've seen this an unbelievable amount of growth in the last 2 years. The COVID has just affected us significantly different than I ever would have anticipated. And the fact is that all of a sudden, I would never have thought that with a pandemic going on that we would be busier than we were without a pandemic.
Right.
But in having that business, and it presented a challenge to my industry, the hospitality industry, and we were ready to challenge and go after it. But one thing really happened that was also much bigger than I ever thought. There was not enough housing, or not enough people to work to begin to take care of that. And while that affects the hospitality, it also affects the medical family and
right.
et cetera. And there's such a wide variety of different people that you have to have in all those kind of jobs.
Right.
All the way from a dishwasher to a general manager that can take care of. And a typical restaurant would have anywhere from 25 to 50 people, a few less, a few more, but that was generally the number of the people they would have. So I think workforce housing is, to me, one of the things that we're going to have to do to begin to not only but to be attractive to the people that come to the Outer Banks, and be able to manage them in a professional way that they feel like that they've been treated well, not particularly by Joe's Restaurant or John's Place, but by the training and everything in general. And I think that would transpire throughout every industry that we have on the Outer Banks.
Absolutely. And we want them to come back, too.
Yeah.
Right. So they had a good experience. We want them to come back.
Exactly. Thank you.
So I wonder if the parade, Kelly's parade, will be bigger this year, do you think, with more people?
And it was canceled the last 2 years.
In the last 2 years, and we were
Very
canceled.
sad.
In 2020, we talked to Health and Human Services. Sheila Davis did a great job
She
of
did.
communication.
Oh, she was
communicating.
awesome.
Amazing.
And she said, no problem, we will support you. And I said, we have COVID on the perimeter here. We do not know what COVID is as a population. Had no idea in March of 2020 what COVID was going to entail and how it would affect us. And the governor had his first press conference on TV and on radio and everything else. And when he got off, Sheila called me within an hour and said, Mike, I think that we're not going to be able to support you with your parade, mainly because they didn't know what was going to begin to happen.
That's right.
too. So
Nobody knew, yeah.
we canceled the parade as a public service
Sure,
factor,
absolutely.
so that it would everything would go. And then last year, we tried to put it together, but it just wasn't getting any footing anywhere as far as with the COVID, what was beginning to happen. So we're real excited this year. We think that there's a great deal of enthusiasm and excitement about the parade, and it's a situation where people get out, and it's always the Sunday before St. Patrick's Day or the Sunday after. My children, my two grandsons, they used to carry the banner of the parade, and they've gotten to be 14 and 10. And the 14-year-old says, Grandpa, I can't carry the banner this year. And so, well, he's playing some baseball, but he's also 14, and that's not what he wants
not
to do.
cool. I hear ya.
But my other granddaughter, that's 6, that was 3 when the last time we had a parade, she's going to have a level of excitement and enthusiasm that this would more than make up for it. So the youth are the ones that have really carried the parade and get people interested. And the families go and they realize they have such a good time.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we're excited, and we think it's going to be on the 20th of March. It starts at 1 p.m., probably lasts to about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and looking forward to it. And we're looking forward to congratulating the Outer Banks Hospital for being here for 20 years, and not only congratulating them, but thanking them and their expansion and everything they've done. And then likewise, we had in 2020, Coastal Humane was our Grand Marshal, and they're backing them up because they're on their 22nd anniversary. So we're between people and dogs, we'll have it all covered.
We're very excited to be co-marshals this year, and we
so
can't
excited.
wait. We've got our float all planned, and we're going to have our team members that have 20 years of service on the float.
Excellent.
So I have to ask, because that's one of my favorite events living in this town, is the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Tell us how it got started.
We had a staff retreat, and we retreated it to Sandling and did something on one afternoon, and then the next morning, and we were closed for business that night. And I think it was in January or February, and probably about 1988 or 1989. And we were talking about things in training, et cetera, and everything as far as the hospitality business. And then we had a miscellaneous time when we began to talk about things that should be done on the Outer Banks. And it was my idea that the Outer Banks did not have a parade. We had a parade over in Manio at Christmas, and they did a really good job with that. But on the beach itself, and we were very limited to the time frames that we could begin to have parades. In the summertime, we were way too crowded and too much traffic, and everybody, the local people, couldn't get involved. And then in September and October were potential hurricane type times, and you didn't want to
Not a good idea
to do it like that. And January and February were probably a little bit too chilly, and so we really got down to March was a time. And we, being Kelly's restaurant, so we decided to be Kelly's St. Patrick's Day Parade. And it dovetailed and did an excellent fit. Gino Blennis, who was the then director of the Dare County Tourist Bureau, he just began to say, Mike, this is great. This kicks off the year. It gets everybody excited. It gets all the local people. And the one thing I will say is we've done no advertising out of the area and kept all the marketing limited to Dare County itself, not for any other reason than to say Outer Banks family affair.
Right.
And I tell people that if you want to go to the parade, we'd love for you to go, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. But I'll tell you two things. It is not Macy's. It will not.
It's better than Macy's.
Better than Macy's.
But it is Norman Rockwell.
It is.
And if anybody,
It's amazing.
Anybody knows anything about Norman Rockwell, it's just you have the garbage truck being followed by the Outer Banks dance studio.
That's
to
right.
be followed by the Boy Scouts, to be followed by the termite pest control type people, and they're all having a good time. They're marketing their business.
Yes.
They're seeing their friends and everything. And guaranteed you'll get 5 times more candy than you do on Halloween. It's very spontaneous. You can't really begin. You organize it. You get people to come out. You tell them what they can't do, what they need to do. They need to be careful with children around the floats and things like that and everything else. But you sort of got to let them wing it the rest of it. 'Cause
That's what makes it great.
You can't begin to be in charge of every portion of it.
We look
Yeah.
forward. I've
We're
always
so
looked
excited,
forward
yes.
to it. It's great, and
It's
we
my
can't wait
favorite
to march in it.
thing. Yeah. So we'll see you on the 20th. Any other thoughts about the Outer Banks and healthcare before the hospital? Anything else you want to share?
Well, I hope that I'm around to be here for the 40th anniversary of the Outer Banks
So do
Hospital.
we.
You will.
And so, again, it's sort of like the parade. I can't begin to think of all the things that we will be expecting and how medicine and, and care will be taken
Yeah.
care of and how it will begin to expand and what it will begin to do. I've been happy because for all those needs that have had to be met, that the Outer Banks Hospital has done a wonderful job of ponying up and filling those voids and being able to offer services that we had only imagined just 10 to 20 years earlier, maybe didn't even imagine. But now they're beginning to be a staple part of the industry and part of what you begin to do. And again, thank you both for your involvement and the people that we've had on the front line and administration have been wonderful over the years. We've benefited from their knowledge and their wanting to work and wanting to offer things that begin to happen. So I am excited about the fact of the potential and what we're going to be able to offer in the future.
You have always been a big supporter of the hospital, and we really thank you for that, Mike. And we thank you for joining us today, too.
Oh, thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Denise.
Absolutely. So if you enjoyed this podcast, share it on your social channels. To hear more Outer Banks health history, check out the library at theobh.com/podcast. This is your host, Denise Schnabel. Stay safe.